Okay, so we've got a few things going on in today's video. We're going to have a bit of a chat about where I've been for the last couple of months and why you haven't seen so many videos off me. We're going to do a bit of a book haul and have a look at what I've recently brought into my collection. And we're going to do a little bit of a review of My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. So come and join me and find out all the details. Okay, my name's Mel. Welcome back to Bookish Brummy. So the way I'm going to structure today's video is we're going to have a little bit of a chat first about where I've been and what I've been doing. Then we're going to go on to the book haul, and then we're going to do the review of My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. Now I'm going to leave the review of My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney to be the last thing, because that review is actually going to have spoilers, because it's very difficult for me to talk about that book without actually, without talking about the plot. So I'll leave that for the end, and I'll put a timestamp in the description box down below, so if you just want to come here for that review, you can skip ahead to that, or you know when to shut off the video to avoid that if you're still wanting to read that and you obviously don't want to know about the plot. Okay, so yeah, for the last couple of months, I've not really been that present on YouTube. I haven't posted as much content, and my reading volume has gone down. So normally I do a retrospective at the end of every month, and I talk about all of the books, and then I rate them from my least favourite up until my favourite, and I give you some stats on how many pages that I've read. And I haven't actually done that for June or for July. And when I collated the results of July, my page count had actually gone down by 32%. So I was reading about 92 pages on average a day rather than 135. And so that's like a massive, massive drop. And, I obviously have reasons for why that's happened. I knew that that was going to be reflected in the numbers. But with, the fact that I've had less time to read, I've also had, less time to film. And the reason for that is unfortunately, I've been searching for a new job. And I know that's happening to a lot of people currently at the moment in this current economic climate. So I'm sure, those of you who are going through the same thing at the moment, you all understand, like, how much time and effort actually goes into looking for a new job. So I am currently finishing off my current employment. So I'm doing that as my full-time job on a day-to-day basis. And then after work, I'm then having to be doing almost an equal amount of time in actually searching for work and writing job applications and preparing for interviews. And that's a very, very time-intensive thing. And it's also a really, really, really stressful thing to have to go through. So even though I've had less time to read, in the time that I actually have had to read, it's been very difficult to actually focus on what I'm reading on, because I'll get down about 3 or 4 pages and then my mind is wandering off back to, oh, maybe I should have put that in that application, or maybe I can do this for that application, and my mind is not really in the books. Um, and that's another reason I would say that I have opted not to read any Stephen King for the last couple of months. Now, I'm a huge Stephen King fan, and as you know, since I started this channel last October, I've been making my way through my shelf of Stephen King books. But as the stress of, having to find another job has been getting to me, I also think that has affected my reading and, sort of what I'm actually enjoying. And so I think it was last month in, I want to say, July, I read the new Lisa Jewell and I read the new Jane Casey. And there are reviews up for those. And I wasn't entirely sold on those books, despite the fact that I've spent all year so excited for the release of both of those, because Jane Casey and Lisa Jewell are both two of my favourite authors, and I even had booked for those books, like I'd done a pre-release order for those books, so I would get them on the day that they were released. And they both really fell short for me. And I can't help but thinking that might be because of the frame of mind that I was in when I was actually reading those books. And I feel like I have read less 5 stars over the last 2 months, put it that way. I mean, I've read less books, but I've read less books where I've got through the book and thought that's really, really grabbed my attention. And it's only a short period, 2 months really, so it's really difficult for me to know if that's because of my mindset going into the book, or the books did just genuinely fall short of my expectations. I have read some 5 stars in the last couple of months. Like I read The Life of Pi by Jan Martel, and I thought that that was absolutely brilliant. And I also read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and that really captured my attention. And also Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that also really grabbed my attention. So either those are like obviously really phenomenal books anyway, and the fact that I've been probably a bit down while I've been reading as well shows just how good those books are, to have actually really spoken to me whilst reading in a bit of a depressed state. So that being said, I did not want to read any Stephen King and then, come out of that book and maybe not have the best impression of that book just because of the state of mind that I'm currently in. So I am pleased to announce that I have now actually been successful in my hunt for a new job, and that means that now I can actually come back to some of my hobbies in the evening and not spend every evening being on a massive job hunt. So I should be able to again increase my reading and increase my ability to provide videos, and also I feel like my mood has changed and I'm much happier now. So I would imagine that I will begin to pick up some of the Stephen King collection again shortly. So that's coming. We don't have any Stephen King for the rest of this month, but I'm hoping next month we'll have some good ones in there. So yeah, that's a little bit about, where I've been and why I haven't posted so much. And for those of you that have still been here and watching my videos, I really, really appreciate that. So sorry that I have not been able to post it. In some weeks, I haven't even posted one a week. So thank you for sticking with me. I really appreciate that. I have actually been to a couple of events. Well, I say a couple, like one book event over the last couple of months. And again, due to restrictions on time and not feeling the best, I've not really posted much about it. But I went to see Chris Carter, the author, do a talk about the new book that he's releasing called Hide and Seek. Now, I have not read any of Chris Carter's novels, but I read the premise of the kind of thing that he writes about, and I thought that sounds really up my street. So he does a lot of detective crime series. Now, I am a big fan of the Jane Casey Maeve Kerrigan series, but I have read all of the books apart from the last one in that series. And I don't know why, but I sort of sense that that series is possibly coming to an end. Like, I don't know that for sure, but I am wondering, where else we can go with this series, with the amount of books that are in it currently. And Chris Carter has a series with, I think it's a detective series with a Robert Hunter, and it's called the Crucifix Killer series, and that's up to about 13 books. And I've read really, really good reviews of that series. Now, I'm quite interested to start reading that series, but that's a commitment again to start that series. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take his standalone novel Hide and Seek, read this, and see what I thought of his writing style and how he puts a story together, to then make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to move on to the Crucifix Killer series. However, all I can say is Chris Carter was absolutely wonderful person to hear go and speak. He is so absorbing in what he is telling you, and he basically used to work as a crime scene investigator, like in the psychology department when, in Criminal Minds, they have the BAU Criminal Mind Analysis Unit. So when that started being first put together, Chris Carter actually was working in that environment. So that informs a lot of his novels, especially in the Crucifix Killer series. So actually listening to him speaking about his experience was somewhat shocking in the content of what he had to tell you, but also really interesting. And I can see that he has a wealth of experience to draw upon for his series of books. So I really would like to get to that at some point. Now, this book, as I understand it, is not as dark and it's not quite the same as the Crucifix Killer series. This book is based on the first idea he ever had for a novel, and then it just never got wrote for like 20 years, and now he's eventually got around to writing it. So yeah, I'm super excited to get around to reading this one, and I might actually do a reading vlog with this one, and then do a little bit more, like talk a little bit more about that talk that I went to, because I think by that time that talk should have finished across the country. But I do recommend, I don't know if it's still on now, but I do recommend, if you have the opportunity to go and hear him talk, go and hear him talk, because he has a really, really interesting life and a really interesting career. So fortunately, my one is signed as well. And he was good enough to stand and have a little bit of a chat with everybody as well, whose book he signed. I mean, he must have been there for hours and hours and hours with the amount of people that were queued up to see him. But yeah, genuinely thought he was such a lovely man, and I cannot wait to read his book. So I'm going to guess this is the start of the book haul now, because that was the one author event I wanted to talk about, and then introduce this one as the first book in the haul. So Other books that I've got into my collection recently was this one, which is The Ruins by Becky Docton. Now, this was delivered to me by Goldsborough Books. It was part of the August subscription for that month. I do believe this is still available to buy in other places like Amazon and Waterstones. But yeah, I am basically doing a vlog on this book, which should be available within the next week or two for you to watch. But the general gist of the story is we are following this young girl called Lucy. She is 7 years old when this book starts, and then this takes Lucy up until she's in, I want to say, her early 30s or late 20s possibly. And it starts off in the late 1930s, in 1937, and then carries on into the 50s. And it basically is a coming of age story, but it's against the backdrop of, World War II and then post-war. And yeah, I have actually read this already, so I can say like I'm really, really enjoying it. So hopefully you'll enjoy the vlog that I've made for you. Can't really say much more about this book, otherwise I'm going to start getting into the territory of what I'm saying in my vlog. So yeah, we've had that one come in. The other book, and I've recently just bought this the other day, and I have to admit this is because I have now gone into the territory of fear of missing out. So I have bought Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. Now, I think just about everybody knows what the plot line for this book is. It's basically we have this trad wife influencer, as I understand it, and then she ends up waking up in the 50s and having to live as a 50s housewife. So that's what I've heard about this book. And I've heard some people describe this as a thriller. So I think, to be honest, I wasn't interested in this book until I heard somebody describe it as a thriller. And then I was like, oh, actually, maybe I would like it then. So yeah, this was at a relatively good price in Asda, so I decided to pick this one up. So hopefully it won't be too long before I get to this one. Okay, so the next book I really want to talk about is, I recently read a book, or two books, by an author called Ayn Rand, who is a Russian author. And she was releasing books in the UK, and I think it was about the 40s or the 50s. But she was originally born in Russia. And she is obviously affected by the change to socialism and communism in Russia, and that affected her writing. And she came up with an alternative philosophy, which was objectivism, which is basically rejecting collectivism and means that you live for yourself rather than everyone else. And this idea has penetrated her fiction and her stories, and she explores that idea of objectivism through her characters. So the first book of hers I had read was Anthem by Ayn Rand. So that is reviewed, I think, in the June reviews that I've done. And I wasn't overly keen on this. I saw there was promise in this book. It's only a short one, it's about 60 pages long. It's quite accessible. I thought that the storyline was basically there for, like, George Orwell's 1984 in this book, to be honest, but this one did not go to the lengths to extrapolate the story in the way that Orwell has with his. So for me, I just felt that this could have gone deeper than it actually did, so I didn't score that well. However, in July, I then went on to read The Fountainhead, which has been reviewed in July, and I really enjoyed this book. And it's a bit of a lengthy one at 700 pages, but it absolutely kept my attention. And considering the kind of state of mind I've been in for the last couple of months, the fact that this did hold my attention, means I think that this is a really, really, really good book. So based on that, I wanted to get some more of Ayn Rand's work, and there were two other books that I was aware of. So I've also bought We the Living, which I'm really looking forward to. So this is about a tyrannical dictatorship and how the impact of revolution has affected three people. So again, I'm guessing this is drawing on specifically from her experiences in Russia. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. This one's not that long. This is probably like medium length. And then the other one that I've brought into my collection is the really famous one, which is Atlas Shrugged. So this is a beast. This is over 1,000 pages long. So yeah, this is about great innovators who have mysteriously disappeared. That's all I really get from the back of it. But again, we're exploring the idea of objectivism in this. So I really liked the way that Ayn Rand wrote in The Fountainhead. So I'm not actually intimidated. I'm actually really looking forward to reading this, with it being over 1,000 pages long. So I can't wait for a rainy day to get into this one. So I'm not aware now, other than those four, of any books that Ayn Rand has written. But if anybody else is aware of any more, let me know, because I am looking to read her entire back catalogue now. So yeah. The next book that I want to talk about, I went shopping in London the other week and went to Foyles, and I went to Waterstones in Piccadilly, so I picked up a couple of books there. So I picked up this one, which is Gaining Ground by Joan Barfoot. And the reason that I kind of picked this one up is because it was Foyle's book of the month. They were making quite a big deal of it, so I read the inside, and it does sound a really interesting concept to me. This woman basically takes herself off into a cabin in the woods to go and basically just be with herself and nature. And she actually does have friends and family, but she sort of abandoned them to go into the wilderness and do some introspection, from what I can tell from this book. And that does sound like the kind of thing that I would like to read. So looking forward to giving this a go. I've got to be honest, if it hadn't been on all the stands in Foyles and then promoting it, I probably would have just walked past this on the shelf, because I don't know this author, and I've not really seen this advertised anywhere else. So maybe this is a bit of a wild card, but hopefully I'll really enjoy this. The other two books I got, I don't think would be a bit of a surprise, won't be a surprise. So I think it was in April, when I did award-winning April, yeah. I read a book called Time Shelter by Georgi Gospodinov, and that was the International Booker Prize winner. I think that was in 2021. I might have got the year wrong, I'm sorry. But yeah, it did win the Booker Prize anyway. And it was an absolutely fantastic book about memory, and the effects of memory, and how memory affects nationalism, I guess you could say. And I, from reading that book, I mean, that was my favourite book in April, and it's one of my favourite books that I've read this year. It's definitely in my top 5. So I really wanted to get hold of some other stuff that Georgi Gospodinov has written. So one of those was Death and the Gardener. So this one seems like quite a sad book. It's about a man who is basically sat with his father, or he has lost his father, from what I can tell. And so he's left with his garden. And it's set in Bulgaria. That's all I really know about it. But if this is written in the same way that Time Shelter was, and if it explores memory, then I'm really, really going to like this. So I'm looking forward to this. And then the other one was The Physics of Sorrow. So I think this is an earlier book. Now, I'm not entirely sure, even from reading the back, what this is about. But what I can say is the characters in this book seem to be the same characters that are in Time Shelter. So we have the main narrator, Georgie, is also the main character in this, as was in Time Shelter. And then you've got the doctor is also the same doctor in this that was in Time Shelter. So I don't think it's a coincidence that they can have the same names. Now, I don't think that the stories are linked, as in one is, basically following on from this one. He's just used the same characters. But what I find interesting is, obviously, the author himself is called Georgie as well. So I don't know if this is, the main character being Georgie in both these books is really meant to represent the author. I'm not really sure, but I'm really looking forward to reading this one as well. So I guess we'll find out. And then I have a book. So what I often do, if I go shopping in London and I'm in one of the big bookstores, I like to go and have a route around the books. So what I tend to do is, if my boyfriend is with me, I'll say to him, go and pick a book that you think that I would enjoy reading. And I really enjoy doing this, because he often comes back with something that's a really good read, and he's been quite successful in doing this. But it also gives him the opportunity to have something to do in the bookstore while I'm busy looking at all the books. So it's kind of like twofold reason for doing this. So the book that he came back to me with was one that I have never heard of, but actually sounds really interesting, called Between Dog and Wolf by Christina Gorcheva Newbury. Now, this is set in 1985, and it's following 4 teenagers, basically just as the revolution in Russia is happening. And from what I understand from the back, it's really about how, when revolution happens, a country doesn't just change overnight. You don't just fall out of one economic structure into another economic structure. You don't just fall out of, one philosophical way of doing things into another one. You know, collectivism does not just turn into individualism. Communism doesn't just turn into capitalism overnight. And this is following these four teenagers as they are trying to grow up and navigate basically a post-revolution Russia, and exploring, like, you know, how they're actually dealing with that, you know, economically, socially, emotionally, and things like that. And I think that I really, really would enjoy this book, because it's sort of following some of the stuff that I have historical interest in from when I was doing my degree at university. So I think this would be a really good choice. As I've never heard of this book, but can't wait to start reading it. And then finally, I have just received yesterday a package that I bought from Amazon, where I managed to get the full collection of an author called Andrea Levy. Now, Andrea Levy, or it might be Levi, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, wrote 6 books, and her earliest one was called Every Light in the House Burning, which was released in 1995, and then she's basically released more since then. And I'm going to open these on camera now and get them out of the wrapping. Now, the reason that I've ordered these is because I think it was in June. June. I read The Mercy Step by Marcia Hutchinson, which is basically set from, you know, the point of view of Mercy, who starts off being born in the book and then follows her up till she's either 11 or 13 years old. And it's in 1960s Bradford. And she has basically, she's in Britain, and her parents basically emigrated from Jamaica to Britain. So she is like the second generation, basically, from like Windrush, I suppose. And as I started reading about Andrea Levy, her books are all basically following the same kind of thing. So her first one, which was Every Light in the House Burning, this is set in 1960s Britain, set from the point of view of a girl, I think, whose parents basically have immigrated from Jamaica. So I thought, you know, I enjoyed The Mercy Steps so much. I thought that was an absolutely outstanding book. Again, one of my top 5 this year. So I really wanted to try and find more things that were like that. And then, as I say, I found out about Andrea Levy. She was born in 1956 to Jamaican parents who, again, had come over to here. And then she's like the second generation here. So she has like a lot of experience, and probably a lot of experience from her parents, to actually be able to write these novels. So yeah, we have Every Light in the House Burning. That's the first one that was released and the one that caught my attention. We have Fruit of the Lemon. Again, I think this is in a similar vein. We have The Long Song. And we have Never From Nowhere. There is this one where there's 6 stories and an essay. And then we have Small Island. Now, this one actually won the Orange Prize for Fiction, and is Whitbread Book of the Year. So this one is actually award-winning. So it's really exciting to actually have this stack of books here. So all 6, because I automatically knew as soon as I started reading what these books was about that I was probably going to love them. So I didn't even really want to go and just buy one and see what I thought. I thought I'd buy all 6, because it was actually a really, really good deal on Amazon to buy all 6 as well. So hopefully you'll see me doing some videos about these soon. So yeah, that's the extent of my haul, apart from, obviously, My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. So let's get into a review of this book. Okay, yeah, so basically I watch other YouTube channels, and there was one particular YouTuber who was talking about My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. Now, I'm not going to name the YouTuber because, quite frankly, I don't like this book, and they rated this book about 6-star. So I think all it really tells me is actually my preferences for thrillers are probably slightly different to their preferences, but I still really enjoy their book reviews, so I'm going to keep watching them. But yeah, they started to basically give the synopsis for this book by Alice Feeney. And the synopsis is, this woman, she goes out for a run, and then when she comes back, she puts a key in the lock, doesn't fit, and then this woman who kind of looks like her answers the door, And then her husband comes and answers the door and they're like, who are you? And they don't recognize her. And she's like, well, this is my house and that's my husband. And they're like, no, we have no idea who you are. You're crazy. Go away. And so basically this story unfolds where this woman needs to try and get access back into her life, but the people in her life don't seem to recognize her. And to me, that sounded like an absolutely fantastic plot. And being a runner myself as well, I mean, that's like quite a creepy thing to think I could go out for a run and then come back and then not get back into my own house or not be recognised by my other half. So that was probably another reason why I was drawn to this book. So yeah, I have quite a big TBR pile, as I'm sure you're probably aware of by now, especially based on the haul that I've just shown you, and add that to all the other books that I haven't read yet and this shelf. But I actually went out to Waterstones, sought this book out because I was like, I really, really want to read that. And it leapfrogged over all of the other books because I was so excited to get into it. And I've seen quite a few good reviews of this, but unfortunately, this just did not hit the mark for me. And the reason why I'm going to have to give this review with spoilers, so I'm going to say this now before we really get into this, is because I can't talk about what I didn't like about this book without revealing some things. So if you want to read this book and you haven't read it yet, then I really suggest that you turn the video off now and maybe come back to it after you have read the book. If you have read the book and you just want to see what I'm going to say about it, then feel free to join in. So this came out at the beginning of this year, and to be honest, I wasn't aware of the synopsis for this book, so I've not really paid it any attention. And I've never read anything by Alice Feeney before. I do know she enjoyed some success with a book called Beautiful Ugly last year, but I was never tempted to read it based on the synopsis, even though it did well. And it was only because I'd seen the YouTuber really talk about, oh yeah, it was a runner that went out and then this woman came back into her house, that I thought actually that sounds like a kind of thriller that I would like. But yeah, as I said, this fell short. And part of my problem for this was I felt that we have unreliable narrators in this, but I also feel like the author has tried to bamboozle the reader, and I don't like that. So that's firstly the first thing that I don't like about this. So as I say, we have different points of view. Every chapter is written from the first person perspective of each of the characters in this book, and there's like a handful of characters. There's not too many characters that you can't keep track of them, but basically you're in their head, so you're seeing everything from their perspective, you're seeing the other characters from their perspective, and therefore as you're in their brain, you should know exactly what it is that they know. They can't really hide anything from you. So we'll get to that point a bit later. But basically, we start off with really good pacing. This lady, obviously, said she goes out for a run, she comes back, she can't get into a house, and that is set down straight away. And then as the book proceeds, we have like new sort of cliffhangers dropped in pretty much every 2 or 3 chapters, and it the pacing is good and it really keeps you on the edge of your seat, I would say, in the first half of the book. However, when the book gets to about halfway, from my sort of experience anyway, I kind of expect that then you have a bit of a lull where the characters are now trying to work out all of the cliffhangers that have been put there, but actually the intensity and frequency of the cliffhangers start increasing, and you're almost getting one every chapter. And it's not like the chapters are that long. I mean, it's like probably about 3 pages, some of them, and you're getting to the point where you're coming towards the end of the book where your head hurts. You feel absolutely, well, I did, felt absolutely bamboozled by the amount of reveals that were happening in every chapter, and none of it really seemed linked totally to previous reveals. So you get into a point where it's like, well, I don't know how I can possibly work out what's going on in this story because there have been so many reveals. I'm not even sure how this is going to get tied together or if they're even related. And to be honest, it was almost too much. I think I actually began to lose interest towards the end of the book because I just felt like that the way the author was sort of going about this novel was to throw in as many moments as possible, but over and over and over and over again, almost exhausting the reader, rather than having a few and letting you sit with it for a little bit and think, oh, okay, that makes sense if I now trace that back to that character's behaviour. But you weren't given the headspace to do that, I don't think. And I also don't think that they actually whatever was being dropped in, actually, I don't think it was obvious from reading the characters that that actually could be, the reason for that, should I say? So yeah, I don't like it when I feel like I'm being bamboozled in order to confuse me so that I can't work out what the ending is at all. But however, I would say that you also could never have worked out what the ending of this was, if I'm honest, based on the information that you were given. Okay, so yeah, the bit where I'm really failing to be able to suspend my disbelief is between the Birdie and Harrison setup. So, we find out 3/4 of the way through the book that this pair used to be married, and that the daughter in question, the one who is in the psychiatric ward, is their daughter, and she's there because basically Birdie hit her with her car. She'd gone out, had some drinks, come back down the road, and supposedly knocked over her little girl in the road, and then damaged her. Um, and like psychologically, her daughter's never got over that, and that's why she's in this psychiatric hospital. So we need to pick this apart a little bit, because one, the bit that I can't get over is that at the first, at the start of the book, in the first half of the book, we get the first person point of view of Birdie, and we also have it from Harrison. And when they meet each other, there is never once anywhere in their mind that says, that's my ex-husband or that's my ex-wife. That's the mother of my child, that's the father of my child. And I feel like, well, yeah, we could never possibly have worked out that that twist was going to be introduced in the second half of the book, that they were ex-husband and wife, because the first person point of view that we're going through with those characters omits that information completely. And I don't know, realistically, people would see their ex other half and in their internal monologue would say that to themselves. Whereas these two seem to be like, there was no surprise. Like, oh, that's my ex-wife, oh, that's my ex-husband. It's like they were meeting each other like they were strangers. And I didn't really appreciate that, because I felt like the author in some way was actually lying to the reader in the first half of the book on purpose. And I don't even class that as being like an unreliable narrator on the parts of those two characters. I just see it as a willful way to try and hide out what your twist is, and therefore the twist isn't really a twist if there was nothing ever really pointing to it in the first place. So I just didn't really appreciate the way that that was done, and I couldn't really get over that. Secondly, there's a scene in like somewhere 3/4 of the way through the book where Birdie is in the home and Harrison is, I think it's in his first person point of view, he's saying, oh, I'm sure she recognises the picture of our daughter on the wall, you know, or my daughter on the wall. He doesn't say our daughter, he says my daughter, I think is his words. And it's like, well, no, it's our daughter. And why would she not recognise it? Like, why would you think she wouldn't recognise their own daughter? So again, I found that utterly baffling. And that whole relationship between them two, that whole twist and everything that was going on with that, it was just totally unbelievable to me. There were too many plot holes. And then thirdly, the fact that she, as a police officer, supposedly had gone out, had a drink, got into her car, come back home, and, was thought to be responsible for mowing down their daughter in her car, and yet somehow she's still allowed to practice being a police officer. Again, I couldn't quite believe that. I feel like more would have come of that. Now, we learn throughout the book, obviously, that Birdie has a lot of regret about what happened in that scenario, but regret is not the same as being punished by the law for drink driving and, seriously maiming a person, which she basically did. So that's the other bit I just can't believe that. Then when we actually move on to their daughter, again, I find it all very confusing, like the story that's told around her. So supposedly, she has not actually been physically affected in her brain. The reason that she is in this psychiatric hospital is because she's mute, and that is a response to the trauma that she suffered from this accident. Okay, I can believe that, but mutism isn't a reason to put somebody in a psychiatric hospital. I'm not even sure that in this day and age, even if you wanted to pay privately to put someone in a psychiatric hospital because they were mute, I'm not sure that you would be allowed to, because mutism is not, going to, well, it's not like it's causing a huge difficulty for the rest of the family. They would just find another way to communicate with her. So it kind of felt like, you know, they had just written her off to this institution, but the reason that she was actually in there didn't really make sense. But then they talked about how she was trapped in the mind of an 8-year-old, and this was all to do with the trauma that she had suffered. So basically, she couldn't look after herself. So that kind of more explains the reason why she's in this institution, because she can't feed herself and she can't clothe herself properly, or make judgments properly. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. But then at the end of the book, they're then talking about how this daughter has been on a plane and has come to visit her mother, who's now moved back into the house. And I'm like, well, how's that then? How is she so psychologically affected that she has to be in a psychiatric unit? And then, you know, what seems to be like 6 months later or whatever, she's now looking after herself, traveling on a plane, and doesn't seem to have any issues. Look, I don't feel like that was really believable to me either. I also think that the final twist should have, well, I'll say the final twist, let's say the penultimate twist should have stayed as the final twist. There is an extra chapter in this book which then, you know, brings in the police officer Carter's wife, and basically a twist to do with her and the fact that she basically murdered somebody. And I just feel like that whole chapter didn't need to happen. I thought it was absolutely ludicrous. We just did not need that in the book. I felt like the author, she should have just stopped writing at the penultimate twist and left it. I almost didn't even realise the last chapter was there. I thought it was like some kind of epilogue, or some kind of author's note, because it was also labelled a little bit differently to, you know, all the other chapters. So again, I thought that was a bit ludicrous, and I wasn't really believing of that. And again, it was that also reflected like the author's attempt to constantly just bombard you, and it was like, no, no, stop. What I would say with this book is I really feel like the synopsis for this book on the whole was good. And I feel like if an author like John Mars had written this book, it may have been better suited to my tastes, because I think then, you know, we could have gone into the realms of slight dystopia, or some kind of chemical government thing that would basically, you know, do cloning or something like that. Whereas this book, you know, it had a good idea, but it just didn't execute it in a way that I thought was good. I mean, even down to the point where they're saying that all these people were in on pretending that this woman was not. So basically, we have the woman. You know, what was her name again now? Eden, that was it. We have Eden, who's basically being gaslit by all these people that she's not who she thinks she is. But I find it hard to believe that you would have actually managed to get a group of people like that together to actually pull off this plot as well. So that wasn't really believable to me. So I just think like the plot sounded good. As I say, if someone like John Mars had written this, they'd have probably gone about it in a completely different way. And in the way that he'd probably gone about it, I probably would have enjoyed it. But with this, it was just like, no, I don't think that the plot unfolded in any kind of way that was acceptable to me for what the original synopsis was. I just couldn't believe in this storyline. There were too many plot holes. I couldn't believe in this book, and I'm finding it really difficult to understand how it's actually scored so highly with some people. I feel like I've seen less plot holes in some of the Frida McFadden novels that I've written, and you all know I'm not particularly a massive fan of those either. Um, you know, I think the only positive thing I can find to say about this book, the synopsis is good, and I think it starts off quite well, you know, in the first 5 or 6 chapters or so, but then it just goes downhill. So if you enjoyed this book, then don't take my not enjoying this book as anything against you. We've all got different tastes. But for me, from a thriller perspective, I thought that this was not really that intelligently put together. As I say, I feel like actually the way of getting the reader to take on board this story was just to bamboozle them with so much information that you actually didn't have time to see that there were plot holes. That's just my opinion. So yeah, sorry, I'm not sure that I'm going to be in a rush to read another Alice Feeney soon. So let me know down in the comments below if you've read this and what you thought of it. I'm sure that that's going to generate a lot of conversation, as I said, because I know a lot of people really enjoyed this book, but it just wasn't for me, sorry. But yeah. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. As I say, there's a little bit of everything in here with a review and hauls and a bit of chat. But I'm hoping that I'll be able to make more videos going forward, like, you know, in quicker succession. At least one a week would be nice. So if you'd like to watch those, please subscribe to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please press the thumbs up button, and I'll see you soon. Bye.